The first thing they handed me at the party wasn't a drink, it was an order. Catering this way. The woman didn't ask. She didn't even look at my face. A black tray was pressed into my hands like it was where I belonged. Crystal lights glittered above us. Parents in tailored suits laughing about colleges, connections, futures that sounded expensive. I opened my mouth to correct her. Then I heard the whisper behind me. Who brought her? Relax. She's just the help. Just the help. The words slid under my skin, cold and deliberate. I felt every eye that passed over me without seeing me. I could have spoken up. I could have said my name, my title, my reason for being there, but I didn't. Because I recognized the tone. The confidence people get when they think they're untouchable. When they think the person standing in front of them has no power at all. So I took the tray, I tied the apron, and I stayed silent until my name was called as the one thing they never expected. They tied the apron around my waist like it was a finishing touch, not a mistake. Don't just stand there, the coordinator snapped. Guests are already waiting. Her heels clicked away before I could respond. Or maybe before she thought I would. I adjusted the knot slowly, feeling the rough fabric against my clothes, grounding myself. Years ago, I might have flinched. Tonight, I observed. I stepped into the main room, and something shifted immediately. Conversations didn't stop, but they softened. Eyes slid past me. People angled their bodies away, like I was part of the decor. A moving table, a walking inconvenience. A man in a gray suit lifted his empty glass without looking at my face. Champagne, he said. Not please. Not excuse me. Just the word, like I was a button he'd pressed before. Yes, sir, I replied evenly. As I poured, I listened. That's what no one tells you about being mistaken for staff. You gain access. People don't filter themselves. They don't perform. They speak freely, carelessly, assuming you're invisible. Two mothers stood near the window, pearls at their throats, voices sharp and amused. I heard Ryan's wife is difficult, one murmured. The other laughed. Well, she's certainly not what we expected. I felt the burn, brief and contained. I kept my eyes on the tray. Across the room, I finally saw Ryan. My husband stood stiffly beside his parents, smile frozen, shoulders tense. When he noticed me in the apron, his eyes widened in alarm. He took a step toward me. I met his gaze and gave a subtle shake of my head. Not yet. Because right then, I wasn't just being ignored. I was being tested. And the people who think you're powerless always reveal the most about themselves first. I didn't have to search for Ryan's parents. They were exactly where power always gathers, near the center of the room, backs straight, laughter timed perfectly, surrounded by people who nodded more than they spoke. Charles Whitmore stood with a drink in his hand, his voice carrying just enough to be overheard. Victoria Whitmore stood beside him, smiling the way people do when they believe they're untouchable. I approached slowly, tray balanced, my presence deliberately small. Honestly, Victoria said, tilting her head, Ryan has always had good instincts. But marriage? She sighed lightly. That requires refinement. A woman beside her chuckled. Well, not everyone understands how these circles work. Charles took a slow sip of his drink. At least she knows how to stay quiet. Some women get ideas once they're given a ring. The group laughed. My grip tightened, but I kept my face neutral. I refilled a glass near his elbow. He didn't look at me. Not once. Madison, Ryan's sister, leaned in, eyes sharp and bored. Isn't it awkward? She said. Bringing her to an event like this? Victoria's smile didn't falter. She won't cause a scene. People like her never do. Then Madison glanced at me, really looked this time, and her mouth curled. Relax, she said to the others, loud enough for me to hear. She's just the help. Something settled in my chest. Not shock, not anger, clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion or poor communication. It was a decision. They had chosen who I was tonight. So I lowered my eyes, adjusted the tray, and said nothing. Because when people decide you don't matter, they stop guarding their words. And I needed them to keep talking. I escaped into the service corridor under the excuse of refilling glasses, and the door swung shut behind me with a soft, merciful thud. The noise of the party dulled instantly, replaced by the hum of refrigeration units and the sharp scent of cleaning solution. That's when I saw her. She was sitting on an upside-down crate near the prep table, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Her black uniform matched mine, but it hung a little loose, like she hadn't grown into it yet. When she noticed me, she wiped her eyes quickly and stood. "Sorry," she said, too fast. "I was just taking a second." "You don't have to apologize," I replied, keeping my voice low. "What's your name?" "Emma." The way she said it told me she wasn't used to being asked. I leaned against the counter beside her. "Rough night?" She hesitated, then nodded. "One of the guests said if I messed up again, she'd make sure I never worked another event in this city." My jaw tightened. "Did you mess up?" Emma shook her head. "I just asked a question." I let out a slow breath. This wasn't about spilled drinks or wrong orders. This was about power, exercised casually, like cruelty didn't cost anything. "Listen to me," I said gently. "No one gets to threaten your livelihood because they're in a nice dress." Her eyes flicked to my apron. "Are you new, too?" I almost corrected her. But then I thought about Madison's smile. About Victoria's calm dismissal. About how easily people decided who mattered. "Yes," I said instead. "I am." Emma gave a small, grateful nod, like solidarity alone helped her breathe. As I turned back toward the ballroom, one thought sharpened in my mind. This night wasn't just uncomfortable anymore, it was dangerous. And someone needed to stop it before silence became permission. When I stepped back into the ballroom, the party had loosened its tie. Laughter came faster now, louder, edged with alcohol and confidence. Jackets were unbuttoned. Voices dropped just enough for secrets to feel safe. I moved along the perimeter, refilling glasses, nodding when spoken to, invisible by design. That's when I heard my father-in-law again. Charles Whitmore stood near the bar with 3 other parents, all of them donors, all of them comfortable. I slowed my steps, positioning myself just behind them, close enough to pour, close enough to listen. "The board's nervous," one man said. "That compliance review isn't nothing." Charles waved a dismissive hand. "It's noise. Every deal has noise. But the report," a woman began. "Is buried," Charles cut in smoothly. "Right where it belongs. Middle of the paperwork. Nobody reads the middle." They laughed, the sound sharp and careless. "And if someone does?" another asked. Charles smirked. "Then they'll be tired by the time they get there. Judges don't go digging. They want clean conclusions, not complications." My stomach turned, slow and cold. This wasn't arrogance anymore. It was strategy. Calculated, intentional. I refilled a glass near his hand. He didn't acknowledge me. "You just have to control the room," Charles continued. "Keep the right people talking. Keep the rest distracted." His eyes flicked briefly toward the staff moving along the walls toward me. "That's what help is for." I straightened, tray steady in my hands, because now I understood. This party wasn't just about celebration. It was about control: who had it, who didn't, and who they assumed would never speak. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. I found Ryan near the edge of the ballroom, half hidden behind a tall arrangement of white flowers. He looked like someone trying to breathe underwater, smiling when required, nodding at the right moments, but never quite present. When he saw me approaching with the tray, his face tightened. "Chloe," he whispered urgently, stepping closer. "Why are you dressed like that?" "Because your parents decided I should be," I said quietly. He glanced around, panic flashing in his eyes. "This isn't funny." "I know." I leaned in just enough that my words stayed between us. "They called me just the help, Ryan." His shoulders dropped. "They didn't mean it like that." I held his gaze. "Then how did they mean it?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. "I didn't know they'd do this," he said finally. "I thought if we just got through tonight, things would calm down." "Calm down for who?" I asked. He looked toward his parents. His father was laughing, glass raised, perfectly at ease. His mother stood beside him, composed, controlled. "They've been pressuring me," Ryan admitted. "About my job, about you. They said if I didn't play along, they'd make things difficult." "Difficult how?" He swallowed. "Pulling support, blocking connections, making sure I don't move forward." There it was. Not love. Not concern. Leverage. I softened my voice. Ryan, this isn't about a party. I know, he said, eyes glossy. I didn't know how to stop it. I looked at him then, not as my husband, but as someone who'd been raised to survive by staying quiet. Silence doesn't stop this, I said gently. It feeds it. Ryan nodded, once. What are you going to do? I glanced back toward the room, the laughter, the confidence, the people who thought the night belonged to them. I'm going to let them finish talking, I said. And then, I added, I'm going to make sure they're heard. It is a contentation and edited. Ryan didn't argue. He just stepped back, and for the first time that night, he didn't look away. I didn't rush the moment. People like the Whitmores mistake urgency for power, but real leverage comes from patience. I moved through the room again, tray balanced, posture relaxed, letting the night unravel exactly as they assumed it would. Near the long dining table, Victoria leaned close to a woman in a silk dress. She shouldn't be near the microphone, Victoria murmured. If Chloe speaks, she'll embarrass Ryan. The woman laughed softly. Don't worry. People like her never speak unless they're invited. I filed the words away. At the bar, Charles was louder now, his voice loose with confidence. You just have to keep the right people comfortable, he said. Everyone else falls in line. Across the room, I spotted Emma again. She was carrying a tray of desserts, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the floor. Madison stepped into her path deliberately. I told you to stay away from me, Madison said sweetly. I'm sorry, Emma replied, her voice barely audible. I was told to serve this table. Madison smiled, slow and dangerous. If you spill anything, I'll tell your supervisor you harassed me. People believe me. Remember that. Emma froze. Something in my chest hardened. That wasn't arrogance. That was a threat. I stepped forward before Emma could respond. I'll take it from here, I said calmly, reaching for the tray. Madison blinked. Excuse me? She looks exhausted, I continued, my tone gentle, unprovoking. I'll handle it. Madison laughed. Wow, the help, protecting the help. Adorable. Victoria turned, eyes narrowing, finally paying attention. I met her gaze without flinching. Emma hesitated. I'll get in trouble. No, I said quietly. You won't. I took the tray from her hands and felt them shake as she let go. As Emma retreated, I realized something with absolute clarity. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was about intimidation. And intimidation leaves records spoken, witnessed, remembered. All I had to do was let them keep talking. They were doing my work for me. The music cut out mid-note. That sharp feedback squeal from the microphone sliced through the room, and every conversation stalled at once. Heads turned. Glasses froze halfway to lips. The kind of silence that only exists when people with money sense something has shifted. The event coordinator stepped onto the small stage, smiling too brightly. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, thank you for celebrating with the Whitmore family tonight. Before dinner is served, we have a brief address. Victoria straightened instantly. Charles lifted his chin. Madison smoothed her dress, already preparing to be admired. I stood still, tray resting against my hip. For this portion, the coordinator continued, we're honored to welcome tonight's guest speaker, someone many of you already know, though perhaps not in the way you expected. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd. I felt Ryan's eyes on me from across the room. He looked tense, braced, like a man standing on a fault line. The coordinator glanced down at her card. Please welcome, Chloe Bennett. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the room broke. Confused murmurs surged. Chairs scraped. Faces turned first toward the stage, then toward me. I saw recognition collide with disbelief in real time. Madison's smile collapsed. That's not, she whispered. Charles stared at me like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Victoria's expression hardened into something sharp and calculating. I didn't rush. I set the tray down carefully, deliberately, like I was returning borrowed property. I untied the apron slowly, feeling every eye follow my hands. I folded it once, then again. Only then did I step forward. I could have corrected you earlier, I said into the microphone, my voice calm but clear. I could have said I wasn't staff. I could have said my name. A hush fell over the room. But you see, I continued, letting my gaze travel across the faces that had dismissed me. When people think you have no power, they speak freely. They threaten freely. They confess freely. Charles shifted. This is inappropriate. I'm not finished, I said, still even, still controlled. I was invited tonight not as decoration, I went on, but as counsel. I work in legal advocacy. I specialize in employee protection and corporate accountability. A sharp inhale rippled through the crowd. I turned slightly and gestured toward the service hallway. Emma, I said gently, would you come here, please? Emma appeared in the doorway, frozen, eyes wide with fear. Madison snapped. You can't drag staff into this. I'm not dragging her, I replied. I'm giving her a voice. Emma stepped forward slowly. Emma, I asked, were you threatened tonight for doing your job? Madison burst out. This is ridiculous. Emma's hands trembled, but she nodded. Yes. That single word landed harder than any accusation. I faced the room again. Threatening someone's livelihood is not a misunderstanding. It's not humor. And it's not invisible just because it happens in nice clothes. Charles's face darkened. You're trying to turn a family event into a courtroom. No, I said quietly. I'm reminding you that the law doesn't stop at the door just because there's champagne. Ryan stepped forward then, finally, standing beside me. Victoria hissed his name. Ryan, stop this. He didn't look at her. I won't, he said. Not anymore. The room was utterly silent now. I met Charles's eyes one last time. You were right about one thing, I said. Silence is powerful. I paused. But tonight, I finished. It belongs to me. We didn't stay for dinner. The moment the microphone was turned off, the room fractured into whispered damage control phones pulled out. Quiet arguments, eyes carefully avoiding mine. I took Ryan's hand, and together we walked past the chandeliers, past the flowers, past the people who had decided my worth an hour earlier. Outside, the night air felt clean, honest. Ryan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. I should have stopped them sooner, he said. You stopped them when it mattered, I replied. Now comes the part where it actually changes. And it did. The next morning, Emma met me at a small cafe near the catering company's office. She looked different, still nervous, but upright. I slid a folder across the table. Resources, contacts, and a clear outline of her rights. I want to report it, she said quietly. You won't be alone, I told her. Within weeks, the venue issued new conduct policies. The catering company created a formal complaint channel. And Whitmore Holdings very carefully, very quietly initiated an internal review they couldn't bury. Ryan set boundaries with his parents for the first time. Real ones. The kind that don't ask for approval. As for me, I folded the apron at home and placed it in the back of my closet, not as a reminder of humiliation, but of clarity. They mistook me for the staff. What they didn't understand was that dignity doesn't disappear when you're ignored. It waits. And when it speaks, it makes sure no one is invisible again.